The council chamber stank of fear, though none of my colleagues would admit it. I could taste it in the recycled air, see it in the way Ambassador Threxel's third eye kept twitching, watch it manifest in the nervous clicking of Minister Vorak's mandibles. We had summoned the human delegation, and now, sitting across the obsidian table from Commander Elena Vasquez, I understood why terror had become our new atmosphere. "Let me get this straight," Vasquez said, her voice carrying that peculiar human quality that always made my dorsal spines prickle. Calm. Too calm. Like the surface of a star about to go supernova. "For the past 8 cycles, you've been selling our colony ships to the Krell Syndicate. The same colony ships carrying families, children, scientists. And you've been doing this why? Exactly. Entertainment value?" Councillor Mekthar, fool that he was, actually laughed. The sound gurgled from his throat sacs like water through a damaged pipe. "Entertainment? No, dear human. Economics. Your species was warned about expansion into the outer bands. You ignored the tariffs, the regulations, the very laws that hold this galaxy together." "Laws," Vasquez repeated, and I swear the temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. "You're calling your protection racket laws. That's adorable. Really. I'm going to have that embroidered on a pillow." I watched her lean forward, elbows on the table, fingers interlaced. Her eyes, those unsettling brown eyes that seemed to calculate trajectories and casualty counts simultaneously, swept across each of us. When her gaze landed on me, I felt my regeneration fluids go cold. "Do you know what happened to the Serenity?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 3,000 people, mostly families heading to New Terra. The Krell stripped the ship for parts. Guess what they did with the passengers? Silence. Even Mekthar had enough sense to shut his throat sacs. "They sold them," Vasquez continued, her words precise, surgical. "To labor camps, mining operations, some to the fighting pits on Skorax Prime. My niece was on that ship. She was 7 years old. 7. Can any of you even conceptualize what that number means to humans? It's the age when a child loses their front teeth, when they learn to read chapter books, when they still believe the universe is fundamentally good." "Commander," I interjected, trying to salvage what was clearly becoming a diplomatic catastrophe, "the Council understands your grief, but surely we can reach a compromise. Perhaps reparations, a formal apology." Vasquez smiled. "If you've never seen a human smile without warmth, consider yourself blessed. It's like watching a predator bare its teeth right before the kill." "Ambassador Quillix," she said, pronouncing my name correctly, which somehow made everything worse. "I didn't come here for an apology. I came here as a courtesy to inform you that, as of 18 hours ago, humanity officially ran out of patience." Threxel's translator struggled with the phrase. "Ran out? This is not a resource that depletes." "Oh, but it is," Vasquez said, standing. The human gesture made her tower over those of us still seated, despite her species being relatively average in height. "Patience is exactly like a resource. You mine it, you spend it, you trade it for peace and cooperation. And you, all of you, have been strip mining humanity's patience for 8 cycles, selling our people, destroying our ships, taxing our trade routes into bankruptcy while your own vessels travel freely. You know what happens when you drain a mine completely?" "The mine collapses," I whispered, my translator making the words sound even more ominous. "Gold star for Quillix," Vasquez said, tapping the table twice. The mine collapses, and everything built on top of it falls into the hole. You dare threaten the Galactic Council? Mekthar bellowed, his threat display expanding his neck frills to their full, admittedly unimpressive, diameter. We command 700 worlds, fleets numbering in the tens of thousands. Your entire species controls what? 30 systems. Your infants playing at galactic politics. Vasquez checked her wrist device, the kind humans used to track time with obsessive precision. 32 systems as of last count. But who's keeping score? Here's what's going to happen. In approximately, she glanced at her device again, 4 hours, humanity will begin what we're calling Operation Reckoning. Catchy, right? My team wanted to call it Operation Consequence, but that felt a bit on the nose. You're insane, Vorik clicked out, his mandibles working overtime. What can you possibly do? You have no allies, no trade agreements, no support from any major power. True on all counts, Vasquez agreed cheerfully. Turns out, when you're busy selling humans into slavery, the other species don't exactly line up to shake hands with us. Something about not wanting to be associated with the victim species, which, fair, nobody likes a whiner. But here's the thing about being a lone minister. When you've got nothing to lose, you've got everything to gain. And when you've got no allies to disappoint, you can get really creative with your revenge. The way she said that last word made my skin sacks tighten. Humans had a reputation, whispered in trading posts and military academies across the galaxy. They were stubborn, yes. Emotional, certainly. But creative? That was the part that kept admirals awake during their rest cycles. Human creativity in warfare was legendary, terrifying, and apparently about to be demonstrated. You're bluffing, Mekthar insisted, though I noticed his throat sacs had deflated considerably. The Krell Syndicate alone could crush your entire fleet. They have battle stations, dreadnoughts, technology your species hasn't even theorized yet. Had, Vasquez corrected, her smile widening. They had battle stations, past tense. See, while you've all been congratulating yourselves on keeping humanity in its place, we've been busy. Turns out, centuries of being the underdogs on our own planet makes a species really good at asymmetric warfare. We've had practice. Lots and lots of practice fighting opponents bigger, stronger, and better armed than us. She pulled out a data pad, slid it across the table. The holographic display activated, showing real-time feeds from various locations across the galaxy. My blood turned to ice water as I recognized what I was seeing. The Krell Prime Station, their military headquarters, was a debris field. Not damaged, not under attack. Past tense. Destroyed. Chunks of metal and what looked disturbingly like frozen bodies tumbled through space, catching the light from the nearby star. How? I breathed, unable to form more complex thoughts. Trojan horse, Vasquez explained, clearly enjoying the confused looks from the council. Old Earth strategy. You want to get inside an impregnable fortress? Send a gift. In this case, we sent 17 gifts over the past cycle. Relief ships, supposedly carrying aid for the labor camps. Each one packed to the bulkheads with refugees, sure, but also packed with some very angry, very well-trained human soldiers who had 8 cycles to prepare, plan, and practice looking pathetic. She tapped the pad, changing the feed. Now I was looking at what appeared to be a mining facility. Human workers, the very ones who'd been sold into slavery, were armed and moving with military precision, securing levels, establishing defensive positions. Every labor camp, every mining operation, every facility where you stashed our people, they're all being liberated. Right now, as we speak. My people have been embedded, waiting, training the others, building weapons from spare parts and sheer spite. You wanted cheap labor? Congratulations, you imported an army. Threxel's 3 eyes were all focused on the display now, horror dawning across his features. This is impossible. The security, the surveillance, the guards were all very effective against unarmed, demoralized prisoners, Vasquez agreed. Less effective against prisoners who've spent years learning your security protocols, mapping your facilities, and plotting exactly how to turn your own infrastructure against you. Funny thing about humans, Ambassador, we're excellent students, especially when we're motivated. And boy, have you motivated us. The Council will respond, Mekthar threatened, though his voice lacked conviction. Military action will be authorized. Your worlds will burn. See, that's where things get interesting, Vasquez said, pulling up a star chart. Red dots bloomed across the display like a plague. These are the locations of human assets, not military assets, just assets. Colony ships that aren't really colony ships. Trading vessels that have a few extra compartments. Mining drones that mine more than just asteroids. We've had 8 cycles to prepare. 8 cycles of you thinking we were beaten, contained, manageable. We were seeding, spreading, hiding weapons and soldiers and very, very angry volunteers in every corner of the galaxy you told us we couldn't have. She zoomed in on a section of the map near Council space. This is the Helios Belt, your primary trade route. 70% of Council commerce flows through here. Thousands of ships per cycle. Would be a real shame if something happened to disrupt that flow. You wouldn't, I said, knowing she absolutely would. I already did, Vasquez replied. 20 minutes ago, human forces seized control of the Helios Nexus stations, all 6 of them. We're not destroying them. That would be barbaric. We're just charging a toll. Call it a tariff. Seems fair, considering you've been taxing us into oblivion for years. We even used your own rate structure. Very thoughtful of us, really. Vorek's mandibles clacked in what might have been laughter or a nervous breakdown. Hard to tell with his species. This is madness. The galaxy will unite against you. Every species, every world. Will they, though? Vasquez asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Because I've been checking, and it seems like a lot of species are pretty tired of Council policies. The Zentari have been complaining about trade restrictions for decades. The Morphine Collective is still angry about that territorial dispute you never resolved. The Thalax Union has been quietly arming their borders because they don't trust Council protection. You've been so busy keeping humanity down, you forgot that you've been stepping on everyone else too. She sat back down, the movement controlled, purposeful. So here's how this works. 6 days. That's what we're giving you. 6 days to release every human in custody, return every ship you've seized, and transfer reparations equal to 8 cycles of economic damages. The number's already calculated. It's very large. You won't enjoy seeing it. And before you think about stalling, know that for every day past the deadline, we start liquidating assets. Liquidating? Threxel repeated, his translator struggling with the human euphemism. Destroying, Vasquez clarified. Trade stations, military outposts, council facilities. We've got a list. It's organized by strategic value and symbolic importance. Very thorough. We even color-coded it. Blue for economic targets, red for military, purple for political. My team loves spreadsheets. Turns out having nothing to do but plan for 8 cycles really helps with organizational skills. Mekthar tried to stand, his body shaking with rage or fear, possibly both. The Council does not negotiate with terrorists. Terrorists? Vasquez repeated, her eyebrows rising. That's cute. You sell 3,000 of our children, and we're the terrorists? You strip our ships, destroy our colonies, tax us into poverty, and we're the bad guys? Ambassador, let me tell you something about human psychology. We have this concept called justice. It's sort of like your laws, except it actually means something to us. And when justice fails, when the systems designed to protect people instead prey on them, humans have a backup plan. We call it wrath. The word hung in the air like a curse. Wrath. Even our translators seemed to struggle with it, finding meanings that ranged from righteous anger to divine retribution. You have 6 days, Vasquez repeated, standing again and straightening her uniform. The gesture was so normal, so mundane, it made the threat even more terrifying. I'd suggest you use them wisely. Talk to your military commanders. Check your supply lines. Count your assets. Then do the math on whether you can actually afford a war with a species that has absolutely nothing left to lose, and 8 cycles of rage to burn through. She walked toward the chamber exit, her footsteps echoing in the shocked silence. At the threshold, she paused, turned back. Oh, and one more thing. The Serenity. The ship carrying my niece. We found it. What was left of it? The Krell had turned it into a prison barge. We liberated it 12 hours ago. Found 47 survivors out of 3,000. 47. My niece wasn't one of them. The temperature seemed to drop again. Vasquez's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes, something ancient and implacable, stared out at us. Her name was Sophie. She liked drawing pictures of stars, said she wanted to visit every single one when she grew up. You took that from her. From all of them. So when you're deciding whether to take humanity seriously, whether we're really capable of following through on our threats, remember that we're being led by people who have buried children. And people who've buried children don't stop. We don't negotiate. We don't compromise. We don't forgive. She left. The door sealed behind her with a hiss that sounded uncomfortably like a countdown timer starting. 30 seconds of silence passed before Mekthar spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. She's bluffing. She has to be bluffing. I looked at the datapad still displaying the ruins of Krell Prime Station, at the feeds showing human forces securing facility after facility with brutal efficiency, at the star chart marking hundreds of hidden human assets, like a disease spreading across the galaxy. She's not bluffing, I said quietly. And I think we just started a war we have no idea how to win. Threxel's 3 eyes focused on me, seeking reassurance, hope, anything to suggest I was wrong. They're one species, 32 systems. We have hundreds of member worlds, thousands of ships. They're one species, I agreed, that spent their entire evolutionary history fighting themselves and winning. One species that has more words for warfare than we have for peace. One species that views extinction-level threats as, and I'm quoting human literature here, just another Tuesday. I stood, my legs unsteady, and began gathering my materials. I'm going to contact my homeworld. Suggest they start preparing emergency protocols. I'd recommend you all do the same. You're panicking, Vorak clicked, though his mandibles betrayed his own fear. This is exactly what they want. Division, chaos, fear. No, I corrected, heading toward the exit. What they want is justice. What they'll settle for is revenge. And what we're about to experience is the difference between a species that fights for territory and a species that fights for their children. I paused at the door, looked back at the council members still sitting in stunned silence. We had 8 cycles to make this right. 8 cycles to return their people, apologize, change our policies. We chose profit over mercy, economics over ethics. And now we're going to learn what humans really mean when they say enough is enough. The door closed behind me, and I heard the timer in my head counting down. 6 days, 144 hours, 8,640 minutes, until humanity's patience, already exhausted, turned into something far worse. I had seen wars before. Territorial disputes, trade conflicts, ideological struggles. But this felt different. This felt like standing on a fault line right before the earthquake hits, knowing that everything you've built, everything you've trusted, is about to collapse into rubble. Humanity had finally snapped, and the galaxy, in its arrogance, had never bothered to prepare for what happened when the victims stopped running and turned to fight. The smart species would start negotiating immediately. The prideful ones would marshal their fleets and prepare for glorious battle. And the rest of us? We'd huddle in our homes and pray that when the dust settled, there'd still be a galaxy left worth living in. 6 days until Operation Reckoning reached full deployment. The countdown had begun, and somewhere out there, Elena Vasquez was probably smiling that terrible smile, knowing that every second that ticked by was another second the Council wasted, another moment of advantage humanity pressed, another nail in the coffin of galactic business as usual. I reached my personal quarters and immediately began drafting evacuation protocols for my family. Call it cowardice if you want. I call it survival instinct. Because when humans stop talking about justice and start talking about wrath, that's when you run. 3 days into the deadline, and the galaxy was burning. Not literally, though several Council military installations had been reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. Metaphorically, politically, economically, the established order was immolating itself in real time, and I had a front-row seat to the collapse. The Morphin Collective just declared neutrality, my aide Prexel announced, bursting into my office without bothering to activate the door chime. They're pulling all their representatives from Council space. The Zentari are threatening to do the same unless we, quote, stop provoking the humans into justified retaliation, end quote. I rubbed my sensory organs, feeling the onset of what humans would call a migraine. Justified? The Zentari think this is justified? Ambassador Quillix, have you seen the feeds? Prixel activated my display without permission, something she'd never done in 20 cycles of service. That alone told me how bad things had gotten. The humans are broadcasting everything, every liberation, every freed prisoner, every tearful reunion. They've turned this into a propaganda masterpiece. The screen showed a human female, gaunt and scarred, embracing 2 smaller humans while sobbing. The caption read, Helena Marcus, reunited with her children after 6 cycles in Krell Mining Facility 7. The children, impossibly thin and hollow-eyed, clung to their mother like she might vanish if they let go. They're winning the narrative, Prixel continued, switching feeds. Now I was watching human soldiers distributing medical supplies to a mixed group of species, not just humans. Look at this. They're helping everyone they free, regardless of species. These are Thalax workers, and human forces are providing aid, transport, protection. The Thalax government is calling them liberators. They're manipulating public sentiment, I protested weakly, knowing even as I said it that I was grasping at vapor. This is calculated, strategic. Of course it's calculated, Prixel shot back, her usual deference completely abandoned. That doesn't make it less effective. Ambassador, my cousin works at a trading post near the Helios belt. She says human forces are letting non-council vessels through the blockade without charging the tariffs. Only council ships are being taxed. They're making friends while we're making enemies. I pulled up my own intelligence reports, the ones that made my regeneration fluids want to evacuate my body entirely. The Krell Syndicate, the galaxy's premier military force, had lost 17 major installations in 72 hours. Not damaged. Lost. Completely overrun by forces they'd been holding prisoner. Slaves who'd apparently spent years preparing for exactly this moment. How did we miss this? I wondered aloud, scrolling through after-action reports. Each one detailed the same pattern. Human prisoners suddenly revealing military training, improvised weapons constructed from mining equipment, coordinated attacks synchronized across multiple facilities. How did our intelligence networks miss an entire underground resistance movement? Because we weren't looking, Prixel said quietly. We saw victims. They saw themselves as soldiers behind enemy lines. Perspective matters, Ambassador. The communication panel chimed. Emergency council session. Mandatory attendance. I transformed my expression into something resembling professional composure and headed for the chamber, Prixel trailing behind like an anxious shadow. The chamber was chaos. Mekthar was arguing loudly with Threxil, their respective species' threat displays creating a symphony of biological alarm signals. Vorak had retreated into a defensive crouch, mandibles clicking out calculations that nobody was listening to. Other council members huddled in groups, voices creating a dissonant chorus of panic and recrimination. Order, Councillor Prime Dexara demanded, her aged voice cutting through the noise. She was ancient by anyone's standards, had served on the council for longer than most species' written histories. If she was worried, and the tremor in her auxiliary limbs suggested she was, then we were in truly unprecedented territory. We have decisions to make, and limited time to make them. We should attack, Mekthar announced predictably. Full military response. Show these upstart primates what happens when you challenge the established order. With what forces? Threxil countered, his third eye focused on a damage assessment report. The Krell have lost 40% of their military capacity. Our own fleets are scattered, protecting trade routes that the humans aren't even threatening. Every simulation suggests significant casualties with uncertain outcomes. The humans have 32 systems, Mekthar insisted. We have 700 member worlds. The math favors us. The math, Vorak clicked, finally joining the conversation, suggested that Krell Prime Station was impregnable. The math said their labor camps were escape-proof. The math has been consistently wrong about human capabilities for 3 days straight. Perhaps we should stop trusting the math. Dixara raised a manipulator for silence. Intelligence reports indicate the humans have assets we didn't know existed. Ships we never tracked. Weapons we never detected. They've been planning this for the entire 8 cycles. What else don't we know about? Silence. The terrifying kind that acknowledges ignorance as a tactical disadvantage. I have new information, I offered, accessing my datapad. Human forces have liberated 23 facilities in the past 12 hours. But here's what's interesting. In each case, they've offered employment to non-human workers, fair wages, protection, transportation to neutral space. 17 species have accepted. They're building a coalition, not just an army. Buying loyalty, Mekthar spat. Typical human manipulation. Or demonstrating an alternative to council governance, Threxel suggested, his tone thoughtful. Ambassador Quillix raises a valid point. They're not behaving like conquerors. They're behaving like liberators. That's significantly more dangerous. My communication device vibrated. Private channel. Unexpected sender. I nearly dropped it when I saw the origination code. Commander Elena Vasquez. The human who'd started this entire catastrophe was contacting me directly. "Counselors," I announced, my voice steadier than my nerves, "I'm receiving a communication from Commander Vasquez. Should I respond?" Dexara nodded, immediately. "Put it on the central display. Let's hear what she has to say." Vasquez appeared, and I noticed immediately that her environment had changed. She wasn't on a ship or in a military facility. Behind her was what looked like a liberated station, humans and various other species moving in the background, working together with apparent cooperation. "Counselors," Vasquez greeted, her tone conversational, like we were discussing weather patterns instead of galactic conflict. "Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to provide an update on Operation Reckoning, seeing as we're halfway through your deadline." "You mean your ultimatum," Mekthar interrupted. "I mean your opportunity," Vasquez corrected smoothly. "Semantics matter, Counselor. We gave you 6 days to make things right. You've used 3 of them arguing about whether to take us seriously. That's your choice. But I thought you might appreciate some clarification on our position." "Your position appears to be widespread destruction and chaos," Threxel observed. "Our position," Vasquez said, leaning forward slightly, "is that slavery is unacceptable, that selling sentient beings for profit is unacceptable, that taxing one species into poverty while others prosper is unacceptable. We're not complicated, counselors. We have very simple demands. Release our people. Return what you stole. Compensate the damages. Stop pretending your economic exploitation is legitimate governance." "And if we refuse?" Mekthar challenged. Vasquez smiled, and I felt my dorsal spines try to retreat into my body. "Then Operation Reckoning continues. Currently, we're in Phase 2. Liberation and asset seizure. Phase 3 begins in 72 hours. Would you like to know what Phase 3 entails?" Nobody spoke. Curiosity and dread battled for dominance in my central nervous system. "Phase 3 is what we call economic restructuring," Vasquez explained, her voice taking on the quality of a professor lecturing students. "You've built a galaxy-spanning economy based on council-controlled trade routes, council-regulated commerce, council-approved transactions, expensive, inefficient, but profitable for those at the top. We're going to offer an alternative." "Alternative?" Vorek's mandibles clicked nervously. "Free trade," Vasquez said simply. "No tariffs for non-council vessels. No regulations designed to stifle competition. No tribute payments disguised as membership fees. We control enough strategic locations now to create an entirely separate trade network. One that doesn't require species to bankrupt themselves for the privilege of participating in galactic commerce." The implications hit like a kinetic strike. If the humans could offer unrestricted trade, dozens of species would abandon council routes. The economic foundation of council power would crumble. That's economic warfare, I breathed. That's capitalism, Vasquez countered. Competition, innovation, the free market you all claim to support, until someone actually implements it. We learned it from you, ironically. All those cycles of studying council economics, trying to understand why we kept failing. Turns out, the system was designed for us to fail. So we're building a new system. Dexara leaned forward, her aged features calculating. You cannot sustain this. Eventually, your resources will deplete. Your people will tire. Your coalition will fracture. Maybe, Vasquez conceded, or maybe we've finally given the galaxy what it's been waiting for. An alternative, a choice. Freedom from council control. It's amazing how motivated people become when you offer them something better than what they have. She gestured behind her, where I could see representatives from multiple species in apparent cooperation. These people aren't here because we're forcing them. They're here because we're offering fair wages, safe conditions, and dignity. Revolutionary concepts, apparently. You're destroying the established order, Mektar accused. We're destroying your monopoly on power, Vasquez corrected. There's a difference. The galaxy will continue. Trade will happen. Species will interact. It'll just happen without you taking a cut of every transaction and calling it civilization. My datapad chimed. Emergency alert. I glanced down and felt my organs attempt to rearrange themselves. The Thalax Union had just formally recognized human-occupied territories as legitimate sovereign space. They were the first major power to break ranks, but the precedent was catastrophic. Councilors are seeing the same alerts I am, Vasquez noted, apparently monitoring our communication networks. The Thalax just chose sides. Others will follow. You're running out of time and options. So let me make this very clear. You have 3 days remaining. Release our people. Return our property. Pay the damages. Or watch your entire power structure collapse, as species after species decides they'd rather deal with humans than continue funding your corruption. This is extortion, Vorek clicked. This is negotiation, Vasquez replied, with consequences. You know, like how you negotiated with us for 8 cycles. Except we're being far more generous. We're giving you a chance to walk away intact. You just have to admit you were wrong, make restitution, and change your policies. Simple. Difficult, but simple. Dexara studied Vasquez with an intensity that suggested she was reassessing every assumption she'd made about humanity. What happens after? Assuming we agree to your terms, what then? Then we go home, Vasquez said. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I heard something genuine in her voice. Weariness. We take our people, our ships, our belongings, and we go home. We build our colonies. We raise our children. We participate in galactic society as equals, not victims. We want peace, Counselor Prime. We've always wanted peace. We just refuse to accept peace that requires us to accept oppression. You expect us to believe you'll simply withdraw? Threxel asked skeptically. I expect you to recognize that we gain nothing from prolonged conflict, Vasquez replied. We're not conquerors. We don't want your territories or your power. We want justice. Give us that, and this ends. Refuse, and we'll keep dismantling your infrastructure until you have nothing left to refuse with. The transmission ended. Vasquez disappeared, leaving us staring at an empty display and contemplating an impossible choice. She's bluffing, Mektar tried again, though his conviction had weakened considerably. No, Dexara said softly. her ancient voice carrying weight that silenced all disagreement. She's not. I've lived long enough to recognize when a species has reached their breaking point. Humanity has arrived at theirs. The question before us is whether our pride is worth our survival. You're suggesting we surrender, Mekthar accused. I'm suggesting we adapt, Dexara corrected. The galaxy is changing. Power is shifting. We can either shift with it and maintain some influence, or we can cling to outdated models and become irrelevant. History is full of empires that chose pride over pragmatism. None of them exist anymore. The debate continued for hours. Arguments, counter-arguments, threat assessments, economic projections. But ultimately, the conclusion was inevitable. We'd lost. Not militarily, though our forces were struggling. Not economically, though trade was disrupted. We'd lost the moral argument. And once you lose that, everything else becomes impossible to defend. On the morning of the 6th day, with less than 12 hours remaining before Vasquez's deadline expired, the Council convened in emergency session. The vote was close, humiliatingly close. But, ultimately, survival instinct overcame pride. We agreed to humanity's terms. The announcement went out on all channels. Council forces would withdraw from contested areas. All human prisoners would be released immediately. Seized assets would be returned. Reparations would be calculated and paid. Trade regulations would be restructured to eliminate discriminatory practices. I was assigned to deliver the official response to Commander Vasquez. Perhaps because I'd been the first to recognize the scope of our mistake. Perhaps as punishment for not preventing this catastrophe. The distinction seemed irrelevant at that point. She met me at a neutral station, accompanied by a small security detail and an expression of professional neutrality. We sat across from each other in a conference room that had probably hosted 1,000 negotiations, though none quite like this. The Council accepts your terms, I stated formally, transmitting the official documentation. All conditions will be met within the specified timeframes. We acknowledge the harm caused and commit to systemic reforms. Vasquez reviewed the documents, her eyes scanning with practiced efficiency. Finally, she nodded. Acceptable. Operation Reckoning will cease offensive actions immediately. We'll maintain defensive positions until all prisoners are confirmed released and assets returned. Then withdraw to human-controlled space. Just like that? I couldn't help asking. You start a war, nearly collapse galactic civilization, and now you're satisfied with a legal document. Vasquez looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something behind her eyes I hadn't expected. Exhaustion, grief, relief. Ambassador Quillix, I didn't want this war. None of us did. We wanted to build colonies, explore space, participate in galactic society. You forced us to become soldiers. You turned victims into warriors. And yes, we are satisfied with a legal document, because that document represents something you never gave us before. Recognition. Acknowledgement that we deserve basic rights and dignity. Your niece, I ventured carefully. Sophie, I'm sorry for your loss. Her expression tightened, pain flickering across her features. Thank you. She was one of thousands, but at least now no other children will suffer the same fate. That's worth something. That has to be worth something. We sat in silence for a moment, two beings from different species contemplating the cost of justice and the price of peace. What happens now? I asked. To humanity? To the Council? To the galaxy? Vasquez leaned back, considering. Now, we rebuild. You reform. The galaxy learns that exploiting anyone, human or otherwise, comes with consequences. Maybe some good comes from this. Maybe other species see what happened and demand better treatment. Maybe the Council becomes what it always claimed to be, a force for cooperation instead of exploitation. And if we fail, if the Council reverts to old patterns? Her smile returned, tired but genuine. Then we'll be watching. And next time, we won't give you 6 days. 3 months later, I stood in the council chamber watching Commander Elena Vasquez address the assembly as humanity's official ambassador. The position was new. The council had never allowed humanity full diplomatic status before. But after the 6-day war, as historians were already calling it, everything had changed. "I stand before you not as a conqueror," Vasquez said, her voice carrying across the chamber, "but as a representative of a species that wants nothing more than peaceful coexistence. We've proven we can fight. Now, let us prove we can cooperate, trade, and thrive together." The applause was genuine, if somewhat uncomfortable. Species that had dismissed humanity as insignificant now treated them as equals. The Thalax had established formal diplomatic relations. The Zentari were negotiating trade agreements. Even former enemies were approaching with cautious respect. Mekthar had resigned in disgrace. Vorak was leading reform committees. Threxel was working with human advisors to restructure trade regulations. The galaxy was changing, adapting, evolving. And humanity? They'd returned to their colonies, their families, their lives, but they'd changed too. No longer victims, no longer supplicants. They'd claimed their place in galactic society not through permission, but through action. They'd shown that patience, while valuable, wasn't infinite. That oppression, while profitable, wasn't sustainable. That even the smallest species could reshape the galaxy when pushed beyond their limits. I watched Vasquez conclude her address, saw the respect in the eyes of beings who'd dismissed her species as primitive just months ago, and understood something fundamental about humanity. They didn't want to dominate. They didn't seek conquest. They simply refused to be broken. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. And perhaps more importantly, humans would never look at themselves the same way either. They'd discovered something dangerous and profound during those 6 days of war. They'd learned that when pushed far enough, when their patience finally and completely snapped, they were capable of shaking the foundations of an entire galactic civilization. And the truly terrifying part? They'd been holding back. This was them showing restraint, offering mercy, choosing peace. Because if humanity ever truly committed to total war, if they ever stopped trying to build and started focusing solely on destruction, the galaxy wouldn't survive the aftermath. But they chose peace. They chose to rebuild rather than destroy. They chose cooperation over domination. That choice, more than any military victory, proved what humans had been trying to tell us all along. They deserved respect. They deserved dignity. They deserved their place among the stars. And we, in our arrogance and greed, had nearly destroyed ourselves before we learned that lesson. The 6-day war was over. Humanity had won. But more importantly, by choosing to win with restraint rather than rage, by offering peace instead of punishment, they'd won something far more valuable than territory or power. They'd won the future. And the galaxy, for better or worse, would be shaped by that victory for generations to come.